be mindful of that too.
Sure. Well, I swear, I feel like everywhere I look, I'm like, oh, there's Mecca. There's Mecca. There's Mecca, which is
I know I've been
beautiful.
seeing you making the rounds too, which I'm like is like so excited. I'm like, hey, I know Stormie.
When it happens, it happens. Like when you have a come out, you come out, right? There's
Yeah,
no like you don't inch your way out there. It's a really beautiful thing, but if you're once you do it, you got to kind of be prepared
right, exactly,
for it
totally.
to happen, I think. All right, you guys, welcome everybody to today's Eat and Greet. And it's a holiday week in the United States. And it's the holiday where, besides gratitude and all kinds of historical things, I eat like a lot. And I'm so excited about it. And so
Yes.
I invited my friend Miss Mecca Woods over, and today we're going to talk about astrology and food and patterns with food and observations we've had and all of the things. So I'm really excited for this talk today because it's certainly, it's a little bit more casual, but it's a thing that we all do. We all eat.
Yes,
We
yes, we
all
do.
eat. So welcome, Miss Mecca, to the Cyber House. This is it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. This is the crew. And people were so pumped. They're like, Mecca's coming. I'm like,
Yay.
indeed, indeed, she is. So, what have you been up to during quarantine? Fill us in a little.
So what have I been up to? A lot of work, which has been a good thing. Very busy. I think a lot of astrologers have been seeing, a big wave in terms of new clients and things like that. So definitely been working. Have a new book, that's in the works. That'll be out sometime next year. But in the interim, I think for me, so quick a little backstory. I just recently entered a progressed moon in Virgo. So, and I'm also a Saturn in Virgo person in the first house. So, whenever I talk about astrology or think about astrology, I tend to do it, a lot from like the wellness and self care, and trying to find a balance between the indulgence, which is very Jupiterian and Sag, Jupiter and Cancer. I love food, love to eat, love sweets, love it, love drink, like I love it all. And it's just, so now that I've been in quarantine, Saturn has been in Capricorn, having these, these Virgo placements, I've been a little bit more focused about like my own sort of like relationship to my body, and thinking about like, things in terms of like, my skin and hair and, eating habits and all of those things. And so looking around when I'm thinking about food. So holidays, absolutely, definitely, some of my favorite times of the year, especially like, Thanksgiving. That was always like a big deal, in my family's house, and, getting together and just really kind of like celebrating and practicing like this idea of gratitude. And food, for me growing up, I think that for a lot of like Black kids, like that was our wealth. Food was wealth for us, you know what I mean? If we didn't have any money or anything going on in the house, we at least knew that we had some food on the table, and that was like a really big deal. And so for me, like my sort of like relationship with food has always been kind of like an up and down kind of thing, like an off and on. Like there were times when I would like really, really like indulge in it and kind of like, eat all kinds of different things. And then I would find that, my body would react to certain things a certain way. And it's funny because I can have memories of my mom, who would always know when I was eating something that I probably wasn't supposed to, because it would show up in my skin. And,
Yes.
it would, you know what I mean? And she'd be like,
Yes.
you have, like, what are you, what have you been having soda? Like, what have you been doing? And so, so now here we are, fast forward, and I'm going through this Virgo moon progression, and then also noticing how, our eating is affected by all the stress that we're all under right now, right? Stress eating and not eating, because you also have those of us who don't eat when we're stressed, right? And just kind of thinking about like how that's affecting us, from a wellness standpoint. And like for me in particular, because I do have Saturn in Virgo, I notice that like when I am stressed and I do go for like the more like comfort food, kind of junk food stuff, sugary, extra sugary stuff, extra rich stuff.
Hmm.
I've been dealing with some indigestion, digestive issues, over the past couple of weeks or so. And after talking to a couple of folks, Janelle Belgrave, who's a friend of mine, who's also another Black woman astrologer, she's amazing. You should have her on at some point.
Noted.
Yeah, she's an acupuncturist and she's trained in Chinese medicine. And I was telling her a little bit about some of the digestive issues that I was having, and she was recommending, some herbal remedies and things like that. And I noticed that, for example, so like when you have a lot of heat, in the body, one of the things that you have to do, of course, is to cool it down, right? So like I'm a fire sign, have a ton of fire in my chart, very little water, a bit of air. And so when we talk about that in context to food, I definitely know that for me, when I'm not hydrating enough, or when I'm not, eating things that have, water content or are cooling, it definitely, again, it shows up, skin wise, and Saturn and Venus are the two planets that are kind of related to like hair, skin, and nails,
Mhm.
and also like the joints. And I've been noticing like since Mars, which is the planet of like related to like inflammation, and
Yeah.
heat, has been at home in Aries, for
6 months.
months.
6 months.
And between that, then we have Saturn, in Capricorn, and it's all clustered up there with Jupiter and Pluto. And then every time the moon cycles through, the cardinal signs, she has to hit Mars and then she has to hit Saturn. And I've been noticing because, moon is also related to like the stomach, and
Yeah.
nourishment and things like
Yeah.
that. And I've been noticing that like when she does kind of get banged up a bit between Mars and, Saturn and Pluto, that it does create, stress, of course, and that too can also kind of induce, digestive issues. And then also too, because we've been having such wildly frustrating and surprising kind of a year,
Sure.
trying to process that, right? Because the digestive system is really about the processing not only of just foods but also of, in terms of like our emotions, and
Yeah.
so all of that to say, I just been kind of like paying attention a little bit more, to that. And as a result of that, I've been looking at ways that I could kind of balance things out. So for me, I have Venus in Sagittarius. So that Venus Jupiter energy can definitely, she loves a good meal, right?
Loves it.
And so I've been having to utilize my Saturn, that
Mhm.
Saturn in Virgo, to cut out some things, or to scale back
Sure.
on some things, in order to, can still enjoy it, but instead of going overboard in a very Jupiterian, Sagittarian, or Venusian way, it's definitely having to be a little bit more selective and a little bit more picky, so that it doesn't, bother my stomach as a result of that. And so I was just thinking about that too, not only just in terms of my own, personal stuff, but just also thinking about that in terms of other people, who may be dealing with that. And like how Saturn, in a lot of ways can kind of show us like how we can work on our wellness and sort of like the things that we may need to sort of watch out for, because also too, like if there's too much Saturn, that's when we tend to be get very dry and sort of brittle, depressing, so these are just some of the things that have been coming up for me, in terms of like ways that we can use food as medicine,
Yeah.
as opposed to just the enjoyment, but also using it, as a means of like taking care of ourselves and nourishing ourselves too.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, just a beautiful way to describe it too. But that is a basis that I noticed this year of how the eat and greets got going was
Mm,
more about, we're yes together but separate. That's fine. But food as medicine, food as a piece of nourishment while we nourish our spirits together. That is literally the concept. I mean, I just love food that much that I was like, we're gonna have to find a way to put it in here and put it together and make it useful, you know?
yeah,
But that's
absolutely.
interesting that you're coming at it from that perspective too. And I will tell you this, I've got Saturn in Libra. So yeah. So
Yeah.
next year, I feel like is going to be wild. Like all the stimulation, I feel like is
Yes.
going to be
Yeah.
like abundantly available. But I did notice that when Saturn made a move for just that little bit of time, that couple months into Aquarius, that
Hmm.
for me with food, I did figure out, I was like, oh, I cannot have stimulants that
Mm,
much because I was
mm,
like, and you guys got
yeah.
100 eat and greets a week. It was too much because I was spun and then mentally would be spinning too. But the good news of the come down of that is as Mars has done this tour in Aries, it's made me be more physical
Mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
to work with because I'm still in earth energy. It'll sit heavy for me.
mm, mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
getting that dynamic of that relationship as well going, I think has been beneficial over here. But certainly I was like, okay, look, 2021 is going to have to be stimulant free or y'all are going to see me walking to Mars.
No, listen, I get it. My moon is in Aquarius, so I definitely get that. Like, when you go, oh, again, when you to me, definitely it's about like just the mindfulness. Like, for me, because I grew up, you know, um, as a Jupiterian, I never was like tiny, super tiny in terms of my weight. My weight has fluctuated. Being a mom,
Sure.
all of that. And I grew up at certain points feeling like like shame around my weight and shame around my body, and so being sensitive to that, like even when I'm talking to people, or doing consultations and health comes up, it's never from a place of like telling people that they should like punish themselves.
Right.
It's more around the thing of like these are what you can do to feel better. And of course, it has a lot to do with like the balancing, and that's essentially what it is. When we talk about astrology or a birth chart, it's really about trying to balance, all of those different sides of us. And so, to your point, when you were talking about Saturn and Aquarius, and we have Saturn and Jupiter moving into Aquarius in December.
Ooh.
That's going to be and then also too North Node in Gemini and eclipses in
Mm-hmm.
Gemini, right?
Yeah.
And so all this air energy, lots of mental mercurial stimulation, lots of, makes me think about like, the internet, the just buzzing, everything just kind of like being like going back and forth. And so, yeah, I'm thinking about the folks who have their Saturn in Aquarius. I'm thinking about the folks who have like strong like Virgo or Gemini in their charts. Even for those of us who are like, Sagittarius or Pisces, like between all of this emphasis on air, and that North Node in Gemini, I definitely think, we do need to be mindful of like leaning a little bit too much on the stimulants, because it definitely can trigger, like, because well, that's already kind of like a perfect storm for like anxiety, and nervous tension. Right. And just kind of being like overstimulated or even over exercising, and kind of like being unable to like sleep, and insomnia and things of that nature. So when I think about that, when there's like a high emphasis of air, we need to bring in, some earth energy, or even some water, to kind of balance it out as well. So when I think about water, I think about like eating foods that are hydrating, because air can dry us out too. Air can make us very parched. So, eating foods that are hydrating, um, or eating foods that have like I think about root vegetables.
Yeah. That's what I was
You know what I
thinking.
mean? Like your yams and your squash, and things that kind of that kind of stick to the bones and kind of give you a sense of kind of like being settled and kind of being full. Things that can also put you to sleep.
Yeah. So it's like it literally in all that air energy, it acts like your own little mini melatonin.
Right.
It's like just chill out a minute, sit down, get the
Right.
itis and
Right.
think about some things.
Exactly. So, this or like, I think about like this is something that I've been wanting to do, like making stews, that you put in like the slow cooker, and even just the idea of like taking your time to make a meal that takes time to prepare. Like that's also like, because I think sometimes we don't think about like the act of what it means to like prepare a meal. I know a lot of times, even like pre pandemic, it was really hard, difficult to do, because you had your work, you had the kids, you had this, you had that, trying to keep up with all of these different things. And it would be very easy just to kind of like grab whatever you could do like on the go. And I think because we've been forced to slow down because of quarantine, and forced to be in at home, I think I've definitely been noticing the uptick, in people like baking again, and and really like taking your time with like and being more conscious of like what you're putting on the table, what you're putting into your body. Like to me, that's been really inspiring, especially for me, because like now again with this progress I remember when my moon was progressed in Taurus a couple of years back, and I was going to like the farmers market, and like and getting all the spices and the scents and the fragrances, and it was just it was just so like so
So
nice.
delicious, right?
Right, exactly. And so yeah, so when we talk about like all of that air energy, I just think about like that like process of like slowing some things down, and getting a little bit more grounded to kind of balance some of that. And even too, like, when we talk about like the oppositions, in terms of like air and then the opposite being fire, sometimes I notice that folks with heavy air in their chart tend to also suffer from like anemia, and always
Okay.
like like low blood, and tend to be cold. And I was thinking about kind of balancing that out with like heat, in terms of like especially like eating hot foods, cooked foods, but also like or teas that have like uh herbs that have like heat to them, like cinnamon,
Right.
um or eating like garlic, things like that.
hmm Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and I've been thinking a lot about how just, the pandemic in general has pushed us very much so into this idea of cleaning just in general. So,
Mm,
and, we're cleaning and touching and sanitizing everything out in the world for sure. But, especially in that first couple months when we all kind of got sent home, people
mm,
were cleaning their physical houses. So it was stands to reason that right behind that, we were going to also clean up our diets, clean up
mm-hmm.
our food, the way that we, go through that freezer. How long has that been in there? All of that
Right.
kind of stuff. Like you're talking about the preparation of all of it. There's just been this really big sense, I think, of getting restructured around how we clean and interact with some of these things in the material plane that's very Capricorn. And that definitely includes our food for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also thinking about Uranus being in Taurus too,
Yeah. Oh
right?
gosh, yes.
Because we also are thinking about the sustainability of food, right? And I know that I think you have a conversation with Demetrius coming up about some of that, but yeah.
Tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. So just thinking about like our relationship to our physical body, which is very earth, right? And thinking about that in context to our relationship to the earth itself, and how we're utilizing it. I've been noticing like an uptick, in like the plant-based diets and things of that
Mhm.
nature, and a lot of people going vegan, which I think for me, when it comes to food, it's really kind of like figuring out what works best for your body.
Mhm.
'Cause I recognize that not every dietary constraint or every dietary sort of approach works for every single person. Like we're all different, in terms of like what our body needs and what makes us feel good. And so I definitely encourage people to and one way you can do that, of course, is looking at your chart for sure. So like I was saying, like if you have a lot of earth in your chart, you tend to need to be some hydration, or even some fire, to kind of stimulate, because sometimes when there's a lot of earth or even a lot of water, that can be people who tend to suffer from like sluggishness or like adrenal
Yeah,
fatigue, right?
it's heavy.
um Very heavy moving, heavy to process sort of energy. And then if there's an over abundance of like fire and air, these are the folks that need to kind of slow down, because there's overstimulation, or a lot of uh yeah, like a lot of like nervous tension and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Inflammation, like I said, definitely can be a result of that. So yeah, it's really about kind of like finding the balance between the two. And like I said, I'm a strong proponent in encouraging people to like figure out like what works. Sometimes I do a thing where sometimes I have to do a little bit of a process of elimination,
Mhm.
where you kind of have to kind of tweak a little bit and kind of see like, if I take this out or if I add this, like sometimes that has to happen, to see like, how your body reacts to certain things. I know that's stuff something that I've been definitely been doing like over the past few months too, of just kind of seeing like what, even with alcohol, like I've had to kind of cut back severely on that too, just because it's not affecting my body the way it used to. I think some of it, of course, is age.
Right. These cells get a little bit older and they're
Right,
like,
right.
mm-mm.
And that's Saturn, right? Saturn is like, listen, you can't keep up the way you used to. You got to make some changes. So yeah, so these are just been things that I've been kind of noticing in relationship to like, the chart, my chart, and even talking to like some of my clients too about like their stuff, definitely around immunity. So like immunity
Oh, sure.
boosting foods, like that's been a big thing since we're in, the pandemic, and thinking about like ways again using food as medicine.
Yeah. So, for you or for to share with people, if we were to hand them their charts and give them one place to just go kind of take a look and say, just take this into consideration and then maybe try and align or ask yourself what's going on here, how would you do that? I know for me, I tend to go quite elementally.
Mm-hmm.
But what about you?
Yeah, I look at the elements to see, if there's an imbalance for sure, So whatever element we tend to lack is the one that we tend to kind of need to lean on a bit more when it comes to balancing out our chart. So, like we were saying, like, if you have a lot of fire or air, you need to bring in some water. If you have a lot of too much air or too much earth, you need to bring in some air or fire. Definitely right now, I think that the people who have their Saturn in the cardinal signs right now, of course, are
Mhm.
getting hit pretty hard because of the Mars and Aries, and then the cluster of planets in Capricorn right now, which includes Saturn, right? So that's our Saturn in Cancer folks, Saturn in Cap, absolutely, Saturn in Libra, and Saturn in Aries people. And so, if you have that Saturn, in, let's say, Saturn in Cancer, um, it definitely have to be mindful of like skipping meals or like not eating, because
Sure.
that, you know what I mean. With Saturn and Capricorn, I think it's about making sure that they're paying attention to, in addition, to what they're eating, like watching how it shows up in like their skin, or like in their hair, like, if there's too much dryness, that usually tells you that you have to you know kind of balance something out. For my Saturn and Aries folks, these are people who tend to like jump from things to thing to thing to thing to thing, and sometimes have a hard time with following through. So they need to be a little bit more grounded now, and kind of eat things that kind of give them that sense of groundedness. Like we were talking about, like they would do well with like those root vegetables, like those
Yeah.
kinds of things. And then, our Saturn and Libra folks, I would definitely say that those folks should definitely be mindful of like sugar and alcohol,
Yeah.
you
I'm just
know.
all over here with my Oreos. So
Well, I mean, moderation.
is that a thing? That a thing? You know what? This is moderation because you know what? I was telling Mecca before, you guys, I don't like chocolate actually at all, but if I'm gonna have it, I'm gonna have an Oreo. But I don't like the center part of Oreos. I scrape it out. So moderation at its finest.
Yes, yes. um yeah, so and then, like I said, if when we talk about the other parts too of the chart, I was also pay attention to your moon sign.
Hmm.
Because your moon sign can also give you clues in terms of like your triggers, or like things that stress you or things that trigger you, like that's also going to show up in like your eating habits, and how you sort of basically like self-soothe. So, for example, if you have like the moon in Gemini, so like our Gemini moons are getting hit now. If your moon is in Pisces, if your moon is in Sag, if your moon is in Virgo, this is definitely a time to be sort of mindful of like how, um, of like what you're eating and when and how you're eating. Because like Moon and Virgo folks, Moon and Virgo, Moon and Gemini people, like because it's so much Mercury there, I tend to notice that they are people who, um, they can go long periods of time without eating, and then they'll be like, oh, and you're like, you might want to kind of insert another meal in there somewhere,
Right.
with Moon in Pisces and Moon in Sag, we're the ones, I say we because I'm sad, but those are going to be the folks that kind of overdo it, right? Because the Jupiter there. Um, Although sometimes it's a little bit different with Moon in Pisces. I notice Moon in Pisces sometimes they can kind of yo-yo, kind of up and down depending on like their mood, because it's water, so it's very like
Yeah.
when the mood strikes, kind of thing. So, they definitely have to be a little bit mindful. But yeah, I would say like watching like what your moon kind of says, about like your eating habits in relationship to like stress, or like how you kind of like try to like self-soothe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny because I just have this big Libra stellium, and my moon is over there with Saturn and Pluto and Mars. And so, as all of this energy has been over in Aries, I can
Mm,
feel the push in there of this, even between everything, but specifically with food and how I'm engaging that me and we balance happening over and over again. And it's not indecisive, it's generally a me, we. I mean, even the conversations in my house, my husband is in Aries, and I'll be like, what do you want? And he's like, I want this. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, is that what everybody wants? He's like, why are you asking me? You're just going to make whatever you're going to make.
right.
I'm like, well, the we. And it's, you know what I mean? It's funny
Right.
because I can notice that I spend a lot of time in my kitchen.
Mm,
So I notice how much of my thinking in my world go around emotions and food, and then the
mm,
dance of the me and the we, even with my body. I try and treat my body as a partner, not a slave.
mm.
So, but it's also tasty. So
Right. Right. No, but I love that what you said, like trying to treat your body as a partner as opposed to a slave. Yeah, that and I feel like that's a really good way to sort of approach it, because again, like I don't think it's about like depriving yourself, of treats and things like that. I don't think it's a thing of like, again, like punishing yourself, or being too hard on yourself for like the things, that you eat. Of course, I know that it starts to get a little bit more delicate when we start talking about people who might have like, eating disorders and,
mhm,
things of that nature, or people who can't afford to eat,
right, right,
properly. Like that's a whole big thing, right? When you think about people who live in food deserts and stuff like that.
yeah,
So it's always about just kind of doing the best that you can, and I definitely encourage people to do that the best they can. I mean, like, even right now, sometimes I, joke with my friends, because like, again, with all the stress and things like that going on, you have people like stress baking and, kind of
oh
like
yeah,
going back and forth with themselves about like, oh, I've eaten, a whole bag of, chips or this or whatever. And sometimes you just kind of just gotta let yourself have it. Like,
right,
like we're all kind of just trying to do the best we can right now, and everybody is going through a whole lot in trying to
hmm,
ba- essentially survive, right now. It's
yeah,
like it's so I think, that's also too like why we kind of have to kind of take it easy, on ourselves when it comes to these kinds of things, but also to thinking about, food as a form of self-care, being able to eat things that are good for us, or that give us the fuel that we need, can give us the strength, to fight another day, to do what it is that we need to do, so that we can get ourselves out of this mess. So I
yeah,
think, again, it's just about the balancing act, and not trying to go too far on either side. And I think, when we talk about that Saturn and Aquarius, Jupiter and Aquarius story, I think that's one of the things that we're definitely going to have to be mindful of, is like balance, because, when we talk about fixed signs are very all or nothing. They're very like, either we're in it
or we're
100%,
not.
or we're not. And with Saturn and Jupiter also, that Saturn Uranus square, that's coming up too.
Mhm.
I think it's really going to be important to like try to like find that middle ground, and not try to, like I said, veering off on too far of either side. And I think, again, the speaking as someone who has a very strong Jupiter, in my chart, very strong Venus in my chart, for me on a personal level, it's definitely been trying to find that balance as well. But again, I think people should do what works best for them.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'm thinking, you know, along those lines, that Jupiter's going to do a small little stay here in 2021, right over there in Pisces.
And
And so
Pisces,
then
yes.
we'll have both rulers in that sign, and that is very expansive. It is
Mm,
boundless
mm-hmm.
energy. So the things and the ideals and the beliefs and the things in the closet, all of that that get to come up, I think we'll be able to even trace them to what's happening in our food patterns and what we're doing with that as well. And it'll be nice because I think we get that sneak peek between like May and July, and then it'll back out. And it's like you can be prepared right there for how did you see yourself act or respond, what was coming up for you. And that can tell you, guide you with your food as we even move towards 2022. So we get some signals, I think,
Mm,
here, even in 2021, getting ready for going forward. And it's so funny. Food is the thing we've got to do, or there are just massive concerns around it. Whatever it is, food is a topic of life. So how we're
yeah.
doing with it can tell us how we're doing.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I just think about that from, even down to, people growing their own food, and like that being, becoming more of a trend that we're starting to see, because of, a lot of the bureaucracy and a lot of the stuff that's going on with, like, modern agriculture, you know what I mean? And how people are looking for ways that they can eat sustainably, but also using it as a way to heal themselves, because of, the healthcare in the United States not being the best, So there's so much, who would have thought there's just so much that goes into eating, but at the same time, it does make me think about like that juxtaposition between like Cancer, and Capricorn, which we're still kind of coming out of that story, right? Because of, we had those eclipses, over the last, 2 years, and then we had the Saturn in Capricorn, and then Saturn Pluto, right? Then Jupiter Pluto, in Capricorn, and so we're coming out of that space of seeing like how much food it and is wealth. Like they always say, like health is wealth, right? But then, food being a component of nutrition, being a component of health, like how that's also something that's really important. And I tell you, like, for me, when I think about like that, and I think about like where, people are in this country in terms of their relationship to health, and not basically not getting the things that they need, it doesn't make me it makes me a bit, like it drives me a bit crazy, because I'm like, wow, like there's so much that we can have, I think, in terms of like wellness and well-being, if we had like the right resources, for
Mhm.
it. And again, like I just can't stress it enough. I think it's just so important for people to do, the best that they possibly can, and it's so important for people to not like, because sometimes I kind of come across like little things, online here and there, about people, like, I don't know if you saw this, but, um, there was a big discussion about people, how they use their EBT cards,
Oh,
and saying that, like, oh, imagine if, people use their EBT cards for like healthy stuff instead of like junk food, not taking into account that, there are a lot of people who live in food deserts, you know what I mean? And
sure.
it starts to get into like this whole like socioeconomic thing. But yeah, I just think that, when we think about food, and we think about like our relationship to it, I think what this Jupiter Saturn cycle that we're about to enter into is definitely going to give us opportunity to change our relationship to it, and change it in a way, where not only can we can eat for our wellness, but we can also make sure that everybody has access to the same thing, right? Because that's the Aquarius, like that's the positive side of this Jupiter Aquarius, Jupiter in Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius story. Jupiter, the great conjunction is like, we want to make sure that everybody has access to the things that they need, and not just a select few.
Yeah,
So
sure.
so it's my hope, when we're speaking about food and nutrition and wellness and things of that nature, self-care, that there'll be enough of us, to be working towards these things, so that, like I said, everybody can have the access to the things that they need, that no one is going hungry, that everyone, can kind of make choices based on like their own needs, and be okay with those choices too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we've got just a couple of questions for you if you feel like taking
Yes,
them.
absolutely.
Okay. So one of them says, do you feel that your chart plays a part in not being able to tolerate certain foods?
Yes, I think so. And it reminds me of so my brother, he's a Libra, but his Venus is in Virgo. And Virgo is one of the signs that tends to suffer a lot from allergies, and he's like allergic to shellfish. And so he can't, like he can't be near it, can't touch it. And so yeah, so I do think depending on how your chart is set up, it can definitely point to like certain tolerances for like foods or even alcohol or things of that nature for sure.
Sure. Okay, good. So the next question is, since Taurus is associated with food and Venus rules Taurus, do you have any thoughts about Venus's transit for 2021?
So from what I know is what's interesting is that we start the year with Venus in Aquarius and we end the year with Venus in Capricorn. So we kind of are bookended by Venus being in Saturn, like being basically ruled by Saturn.
Mhm.
And so I think what's interesting with that is that again, I think what we're going to see, because we're coming out of this whole Saturn Pluto story, and then we're going into this Jupiter Saturn cycle, and then Uranus and Taurus is really going to be around like sustainability. Is the way that we're eating sustainable? And again, how do we make sure that everyone has access to proper nutrition and that no one is going, because if we live in the richest country in the world, right, or so they say, there shouldn't be anyone going hungry here, right? And so I'm just thinking about that in context too. So like Venus is about like pleasure. Venus is feeling good. Venus is the people like, and I noticed too like whenever Venus is kind of duking it out with like some of the bigger planets like Pluto or Saturn, it usually a lot of stuff comes up around like rights and fairness and justice.
Mhm.
And so when I think about that in context to these transits that are coming up for next year, I think we're going to see a lot more stuff around food justice.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, I am certain of it.
Yeah.
And Uranus is not done. Plus, the other kind of lingering thing I think about that's still going to be the topic for a minute is
Mm.
Uranus is in Taurus still, and we've got that going for a bit. But Pluto's not done. Jupiter and Saturn move on, but Pluto still has to
Mm-hmm.
finish his work in the transformation of Capricorn. So we're going to take that with us. We are moving forward, I think, or moving different.
Right.
But Pluto still has. So we're going to, I think, food, resources, all of these things stay a conversation for a minute here, for a couple of
Mm.
years, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think about what it means to, be food insecure, right? And like Venus is the planet that's associated, like one of the planets that's associated with security, and having enough. Jupiter is the other one. So yeah, I think that definitely is going to be what we're going to be seeing in terms of like shifting our relationship to it on a personal level and also a collective level in terms of food.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Man, well, so what are you doing for your holiday?
Um, I probably will be home. I may
Okay, like
go. I
everybody
may.
else.
Yes. I may go to check in on my parents. And make sure that they're okay. My daughter. I don't know. Maybe I'm still up in the air in terms of like whether I want to go to my parents' house or if we're going to go there or if we're going to stay here and eat. I'm not sure just yet. It's very much like I said, so last minute. Um, but yeah, I think right now my major goal when it comes to like holiday food is if we don't do anything in person, definitely trying to, because my birthday is also coming up in a couple of weeks too. So it'll probably be a lot of Zoom gatherings,
Yeah.
and trying to connect with people that way.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
We're gonna we have a portion of our family that is further away, and they're gonna zoom in at dessert time. So we
Oh.
get to have dessert together. So yeah, it's an interesting and different kind of year, kind of time for the entire world right now. But we're making it
Yeah.
work.
we're making it work. We're making it work. And I think as long as we remain flexible, that's that's the beauty of the mutability, with Gemini and Sag, just like staying flexible, trying to roll with the punches and again, do the best that you can. And I think that as long as we can do that, we can get out of this thing. Yeah.
Brilliant. Mecca, thank you so much for coming over for a chat.
Thank you.
Astrology, food, things to think about, you guys. And we're going to talk more about this Uranus and Taurus gathering in the sky tomorrow because Demetrius Bagley will be here and he's got some phenomenal ideas and correlations between Uranus and Taurus and shopping, which I think is brilliant. Because at least in the United States, I mean, I actually don't know if they have it other places, but in the United States, we're going to have Black Friday sales, some of which have already started. Some will not start until Friday. So let's see what everybody's got to say. But Mecca, I appreciate you coming over and I would
Thank
love to have
you
you
for
back
having me.
sometime.
Yes, I'd love to come back. Thank you so much. I had such fun.
Yeah. All right, you guys, we will see you.